Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, July the 10th, 2026. In this video, I will of course be talking about the 12 signs. Yes, I will be going through all the 12 signs and I will be doing forecasts for them. I will additionally be considering particular aspects. And the two aspects that really come to mind today are Venus conjunct the South Node and Venus trine Chiron. So let's look at what is going on today. So here is a chart for today, set for noon, New York time on July the 10th, 2026. And the moon is in late Taurus. There it is, noon New York time. Moon is at 25 degrees 54 Taurus. So that's pretty close to Algol, that rather difficult fixed star that has a pretty terrible reputation. Now, the moon does move on to Algol, every month, so it's not exactly an unusual event. But perhaps with moon on Algol, there may be moments when we feel that things aren't particularly nice, and with Algol, there may be moments where we perhaps experience other people's jealousy. Maybe we can be jealous ourselves. So that can be a theme of moon on Algol. But I don't want to exaggerate, and perhaps it's more important to say that the moon is still in the sign of its exaltation. I mean, in fact, now that the moon is in late Taurus, you could say, well, it's exalted in both zodiacs. So from a perspective of Vedic astrology, the moon has just gone into Taurus. So we've got moon sort of double Taurus, and the moon at the beginning of Taurus in Vedic astrology, is considered to be really fortunate, with 3 degrees Taurus being the point of the moon's exaltation or maximum exaltation in sort of Vedic terms. In Western astrology, also 3 degrees Taurus is the point of the moon's exaltation, and so it's not just a sign of exaltation. There is a degree of exaltation, again from a Vedic perspective. I should just show you this chart. So this is a chart from Western astrology, from a perspective of Western astrology, and if I just switch it round and show you it from a Vedic view, you can see that the moon has just gone into Vedic Taurus. So overall, the moon is not in bad shape. It really isn't, in spite of it being conjunct Algol. And so that might mean that a lot of things are working, and the moon, when it's in Taurus, as it moves through Taurus, it makes sextiles to the Sun and Mercury. I'm just switching back to the Western chart here, because I am a Western astrologer, and sometimes in the comments, I'm asked, is this a Western astrology or is this Eastern astrology? And I do Vedic astrology. It's probably 10% of my work, if that. I'm aware of it, but in terms of these 12 signs and these videos, it's almost entirely going to be Western astrology. So from the perspective of Western astrology, the moon is it's making a sextile to the Sun, and it's just making a sextile to Mercury. And moon sextile Sun is really a very harmonious influence. You've got Taurus sextile Cancer. These are two signs that relate to each other very well. And then the moon moves on, sextile to Mercury. That means perhaps clear thinking, smooth communication, and it's really completely positive. And then Moon moves on, and at I think it's 11:42 p.m. tonight, so late this evening, London time, it moves into Gemini, and a bit earlier in the day if you're in the Americas. So yeah, eventually the Moon does move into Gemini. I mean, that is going to be interesting, and obviously I'll be talking about that when I do the horoscopes for the weekend. But when the Moon moves into Gemini, it will be making a conjunction to Uranus and conjunction to Mars. So Uranus and Mars could come back into focus when that sign change happens. But I don't think that's anything we have to worry about today. And as far as what the main events are concerned, well, it's Venus conjunct the South Node, and it is Venus trine Chiron. I mean, Venus conjunct the South Node is potentially an issue, because when Venus conjuncts the South Node, you could argue that Venus gets weakened. The South Node is of the nature of Saturn. I mean, at least that is a traditional view of the South Node. The North Node is the nature of Jupiter. So Venus loses strength because of its conjunct the South Node. It also loses strength because it's in Virgo, because it's in the sign of its fall. And so, Venus is, the planet of relationships. And in my video for yesterday, I mentioned the fact that, Venus in Virgo can be quite transactional. I mean, not everyone agreed with that. And I'm not saying that if you have Venus in Virgo in your horoscope, you are transactional. I am instead looking at things in a more sort of general view. And I'm saying, okay, Venus is in Virgo right now. And so it's not about natal charts. It's about how people are feeling right now, the general atmosphere. And there is a transactionality here, I think. So if someone is trying to help, they're helping you for a reason. Nothing happens without a reason. That's always the case, but I think it's particularly strong now with Venus in Virgo conjunct the South Node, and the South Node is telling us, perhaps, if you take a karmic view of the nodal axis, the South Node being the past, the North Node being the future. The South Node is, what we should be moving away from. And the North Node is, of course, what we should be moving to. And so Venus conjunct the South Node is saying, well, it is obviously not the right thing to do, to be thinking in a transactional way, to be thinking about how we are going to benefit from a situation, how we are going to lose. We'll do it, by the way. It's nothing unique to any particular person. Everyone is selfish to an extent, but I think selfishness could be really emphasized with Venus conjunct the South Node, just looking at things from a material perspective. Everything is about money. Everything is costed, and that's what it's all about. So I don't know, if you look at how people behave, how governments behave, they see a benefit in the short term. They see a material benefit. We are going to make extra money here, and that in itself is full justification. Nothing else matters. And perhaps with Venus conjunct the South Node, we have to think about broader costs. It's not just the costs in terms of dollars or pounds or euros. It's maybe the environmental cost, the cost to people's health and well-being, the cost, the cost in a sort of a moral sense. So if we are going to look at concepts of cost, we can't just focus on the financial side of things. We have to look at everything, and if we do find ourselves being overly focused on the price of things right now, then that is a sure sign that the South Node is operational. Now, Venus of course, is a planet that can relate to money. That's true, as I've just been describing. It can also relate to other people. And it might well be the case that with Venus conjunct the South Node, some of us might be attracted to people from the past, people who maybe they're not doing us any good anymore, but it's easy. We know how to deal with certain people from the past. We've established relationships with them. And so the line of least resistance is just to keep on going as before. Whereas in reality, perhaps we should be saying goodbye. I mean, in terms of midpoints at the moment, the Sun is on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. So the Sun is aspecting the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. And what that means, Mercury-Saturn is about a farewell. Sun on the Mercury-Saturn. Likewise, Venus is on the Sun's. Venus is square the Sun-Saturn midpoint. So we've got two midpoints which are kind of connected with, maybe loneliness, but also about separation. And it might well be that separation is actually the way forward. And why do we want to separate? Because we just know. We just have a feeling about it. Now, when I say separation, I'm not talking about, I think, sort of major relationships in your life. It's perhaps more the sort of minor relationships, people you've got to know on the way, and they've been useful up to a point, and now it might be time to say goodbye. But it is difficult to say goodbye with Venus making a conjunction to the South Node. And further, we're thinking about, our own destiny. We're thinking about, where we should be going. All of us have our own separate destinies. And in the end, we're the only ones that can make the decisions. But it's just so easy to be tempted off the path. And Venus conjunct the South Node can be about being tempted off the path. If we spend time with other people, if we listen to other people, if we pay attention to their advice, they might be leading us astray. So I think with Venus conjunct the South Node, it's very important that we make our own decisions, and that we kind of focus on the opposite. And of course, the opposite, Venus conjunct the South Node, is the North Node in Pisces, and that is quite an emotional placement. We need to listen to our feelings. So if our feelings are telling us something, then we should probably follow our feelings, especially if our feelings are contradicting what other people are telling us, what other people are tempting us to do. Now, Venus is not just conjunct the South Node, it is making a trine to Chiron. And, Venus trine Chiron, that's, quite an interesting aspect. And it might say something about our attitude to relationships. There are perhaps two ways of looking at it. If you want to go down the wounded healer route, then Venus trine Chiron might be about wounds that have taken place within relationships. Perhaps we have easy access to these wounds. We can feel them. Or perhaps it might be the process of wounding. If someone wants to hurt someone else, maybe with Venus trine Chiron, it's easier than usual. And so I don't think we should necessarily see Venus trine Chiron as always being a constructive aspect. It might potentially have a dark side, but it could also be about a vulnerability. Getting wounded by people when there's a trine, it may not take much. Someone says something and it hurts our feelings. But, Chiron is the maverick. Chiron has interesting ideas, and Chiron can be quite disruptive. So perhaps with Venus trine Chiron, we're talking about particular ideas about relationships. We have ideas about the way relationships should be. These ideas could be rather unconventional. And with Venus trine Chiron, if we want to change relationships and shake them up, then I think it actually might be quite easy. And okay, well, there might be also a lot of complaints, but Chiron can be quite a willful energy, and it wants to do things its way. So if you're not happy with an existing relationship with Venus trine Chiron, then maybe it's time for a change, and maybe this change with Venus conjunct the South Node relates to a break from the past. So that's the position of the planets if we set things for New York. If we set things for Sydney, Australia, the Moon is a bit earlier in the sign. Moon is at 17 degrees Taurus. So the Moon is not on Algol if you're in Australia or New Zealand, and that's one positive. Another positive is that the Moon is exactly trine the Sun in the middle of the day, and so I think that it's probably a day that is going to be relatively harmonious. And, if you feel that there have been recent disagreements and as things have been a bit unsettled, I think you have a chance to sort of calm things down, and it needn't be about other people. It just might be about yourself, and just feeling happy, comfortable, and yes, harmonious. And then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the Sun at the centre of the solar system. So we still have that Venus-Mars opposition. This Venus-Mars heliocentric Venus-Mars opposition has been active for nearly a week, and it is saying something about relationships. I mean, if you've been listening to my introduction so far, I have been suggesting that some relationships perhaps have passed their sell-by date, or at least need to be changed. And you can see the conflict here. Venus and Mars, the two planets of relating. Venus more sort of representing the sort of the female side, Mars the male side, and their opposition one another. And so there is just a different view, and perhaps it's a situation where that difference cannot be resolved, but maybe it can be resolved. After all, Mercury is at 13 degrees Capricorn, so Mercury is trine Mars and it is sextile Venus. So with those two Mercury aspects, it might mean that we're dealing with a difficult situation where we are dealing with a fundamental incompatibility, but through the right words and perhaps through a bit of diplomacy, we can get round the problem. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, July the 10th, 2026.
Aries, you're certainly able to make an impression if you want, certainly in a verbal sense. So if you have something to say, then you can really be listened to. People will find it very difficult to ignore you, and I think that you're going to be particularly powerful, when you say things, out of the blue. You're quiet. You don't give any impression that something is ready to happen, and then you make your move, and straight away you make an impact. So today, you shouldn't feel that you can't assert yourself, certainly in a verbal sense. But overall, is it really necessary? I mean, there is a sense today in which you do want to just reflect. There has been a lot going on recently, and you might feel that there's nothing that you want to put out there. And so, yeah, perhaps you can just watch, and if something happens which isn't to your liking, then you can certainly intervene. And, as far as the external environment is concerned, there is, a danger that if you get too involved in it all, and particularly with particular people, then it might not be so satisfactory. I think there could be subtle pressure, Aries, to do things that you don't really want to do, things that just seem just unnecessary, even annoyingly unnecessary. And, it might, for one reason or another, be difficult to say no. So, that might be a good reason for keeping your distance for most of the day. And this would, especially be the case when you're dealing with people who maybe are in a position of authority, who in the past you had listened to them, and you might kind of feel that, they know better than you in particular areas. But, if you're in a situation where you are being told what to do, and where there is apparently a right way of doing things and a wrong way, then it just could be annoying. And so that might be a good reason, Aries, to keep some distance. It's not like you have to completely avoid other people, but certain people, particularly the kind of people that really like things to be done properly, people who are sticklers for detail, then those kind of people, should perhaps be avoided. And, there is a place still for you to just be just drifting and working things out in your own way, and not feeling that you have to be, directly involved with everything. So, overall, actually, Aries, I'm not saying that it need be a spectacular day at all. I mean, why would you want it to be a spectacular day? I mean, there's not actually a huge amount to report. I mean, the Mars-Uranus conjunction, which I've been going on and on about, which has been destabilizing. I think that Mars-Uranus conjunction is starting to lose some of its significance, and that means there is less pressure. And also, of course, there has been what did we have? We had a sort of last quarter moon, and the last quarter moon, earlier in the week, that might have been a real call for action, sort of urgent action before it was too late. Well, Aries, you've made your decisions. You've decided what you're going to do. Maybe you've done it already, and if you're not doing anything today, then alternatively you might actually be still dealing with the consequences of past actions. So you decided you were going to do something, you did it. It may have worked out, it may not have worked out, but whatever happened, there were things perhaps to put in place to make sure that you really were able to see things through. I mean, I think it's the case that, once you start something, you are kind of obliged to see through the consequences. And so, yes, there have been consequences. Maybe those consequences haven't always been 100% easy, but, you're able to go through with it, in your own way. And also, Aries, I think that what needs to be done without having to be told. There's nothing more annoying than to be, criticized for something that you already know you've made a mistake. You're already in a position where you're trying to correct the mistake. Then, someone bothers you and tells you you've got to get it right. You are getting things right. But Aries, you are getting things right, at your own pace. And the last thing you need is just for some message to be overly reinforced. And so it just could be that actually certain people are an irritation, And, over the last couple of days, this irritation might actually have been slowly building up. We have had, heliocentrically, remember we had a Venus-Mars opposition. I mean, okay, that Venus-Mars opposition is starting to subside, but just to remind you of the heliocentric picture, here it is. Okay, Venus is, this is obviously from a position of where you put the sun at the center of the solar system, but here you can see that Venus is still opposition Mars. Okay, it might be 2 degrees apart, but it's close enough to be having an impact. And so not everyone is to your liking, and if you make an effort to interact with people, that effort might not always be worthwhile. But as I said, right at the beginning, you have the capacity to be very verbal. Sure, someone can criticize you, and if you do find yourself at the receiving end of criticism, probably you should just soak it up. Just let people let off steam. If they want to be critical for the sake of it, just let them get on with it. But if you feel it's unacceptable, if you feel that you really need to say something, then you certainly can. And to an extent, you will have the element of surprise. You suddenly blast someone with a few carefully chosen words, and straight away you can change everything. You can kind of regain the power. But hopefully it won't come to that, and it might then be said that the less you have to do with certain people, the better certainly for you. Taurus. The moon continues moving through your sign. I mean, it's getting pretty late in Taurus, right now. In fact, the moon is conjunct Algol in Taurus. I mean, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I mean, I know that the moon in Algol has a difficult reputation, but remember that the moon makes a conjunction to Algol every month, and usually Taurians survive. And while the moon is making this conjunction to Algol, it is making a sextile to Mercury. And maybe we can forget about Algol. Moon sextile Mercury, that is a great aspect, and particularly as the sun is involved. So what happens is that firstly the moon makes a sextile to the sun, then it makes a sextile to Mercury. So that aspect is pretty harmonious. It really allows you to be yourself, and you don't have to apologize. But why would you need to apologize? Because right now you can come over as someone who is very reasonable. You're unlikely to rock the boat, and at the same time you're starting to feel more sort of easy with yourself. I mean, you don't want to get too easy, but Venus is changing sign. Venus is now in Virgo. So yesterday, in my video for yesterday, I talked about Venus in Virgo. And some of you might have thought I was a little bit harsh when I talked about Venus in Virgo. I was looking at Venus in Virgo in a quite sort of abstract way, in isolation. And it's true that Venus in Virgo can be somewhat transactional, putting its own financial and material interests first, and sometimes sort of ignoring the finer things, especially on an emotional level. So that is certainly one way of looking at Venus in Virgo, and it might well be that at the moment, Taurus, you are starting to look at your own material interests in a new way, and perhaps you feel that the emotional side of things just might be something you don't necessarily want to be too bothered with, at least privately. I think that externally, in terms of the way you deal with people, or at least the way you come across, I think you can come across as being someone who is relatively warm, and you know what to say, and you can be reassuring, and as I've suggested, with Moon making sextiles to Sun and Mercury, you can create a certain atmosphere of sort of harmony and well-being, but still you're not forgetting about yourself, because now we've got planets in Earth signs. Even when the Moon moves out of Taurus into Gemini, even then we've now got Venus, a personal planet in an Earth sign, and so that does make all the difference, and certainly that's something that I think that Taurans should be very happy about. Now, Venus does make a conjunction to the South Node, and this Venus South Node conjunction, you can see it in two different ways. If you want to look at Venus, look at the nodes in the sort of traditional way. When I say traditional, I'm thinking more kind of standard 20th century Western astrology. There was a book by Shulman. I read it in the 80s. I think he wrote two books, did he? And Shulman, I think it was Shulman, he wrote this book on the nodes, and I think that Shulman very much emphasised that the North Node was, the way one goes forward, connecting the nodes with karma. The North Node is what we should be doing, the South Node is what we should not be doing, and perhaps the South Node represents previous incarnations. I mean, if not previous incarnations, what we were doing in the past. And so with Venus conjunct the South Node, there is some temptation to do things which are just too easy. Yeah, you do them really well. Great. But is that the right thing to be doing? The idea is to move beyond what you can do well, and perhaps to challenge yourself. And also maybe to put yourself in a position where you are relating your actions and your abilities to other people. I mean, the idea perhaps is that you work on something on your own, you get to a stage where you're really good at it, and then you put it to the test. You see how other people relate to it, and you also make some effort to understand, other people's points of view, and also, what other people can tolerate. Sometimes, one works hard on something, and when one sort of presents it to other people, they're not so keen. They might recoil. I mean, in an extreme situation, but even if they don't recoil, they might just not be happy with the way you present yourself, and so you have to make a bit of extra effort. So you take something that is quite raw, and then you perhaps change the way it's presented. You present it in a way that is more reasonable. So it's not just about you and what you can do. It's about how you can do something which is acceptable to society at large. I mean, that's at least one way of looking at Venus conjunct the South Node, and it just may be in general with Venus conjunct the South Node that you're just tempted to do something which you maybe just shouldn't be doing. I mean, it's not necessarily bad, but it's maybe got rather tiresome, and you kind of need to move on. And at the same time, the North Node is still in Pisces, and sometimes Taurans can forget the emotional dimension. They can be a little bit blunt. Now, I don't think that is going to be the case, because I said earlier that the Moon is sextile the Sun, the Moon is sextile the Mercury, so I think you're quite able to understand other people's sensibilities and their emotions and so on. But there just might be just a certain temptation to just look at things in a very sort of two-dimensional way, and perhaps emphasizing the
the material over the emotional. So that's certainly a way in which one can look at the nodes. There is an alternative approach, and there may be really nothing bad to say at all about Venus conjunct the South Node, because the nodes could be regarded as just being about an axis. The North Node, South Node, they are an axis of sociability. It's who you are connecting with. And with Venus conjunct the South Node, it's making a hard aspect of the North Node. But if the North Node is just about connections, then with Venus, your ruler, conjunct the nodal axis, just means you're actually quite good at making connections. You can relate to people very well, and this is happening at the same time as the Moon is making a sextile to Mercury. So maybe we should just forget about all the sort of the karmic side of the nodal axis and just follow the German approach. When I say the German approach, it's because sort of the Uranian school and the cosmobiology school. I mean, the sort of the Eberton approach to a node, just sees it as a point of contact. And as a point of contact, this means that you are very good at making connections with people, and you can do it, on your terms. And perhaps, that's where the Venus in Virgo comes in. With Venus in Virgo, there is a certain amount of discipline. You're not going to lose your structure. You're not going to be sort of chaotic. You're not going to follow the crowd. You're very aware of your limitations and how far you want to take things, but you can just be warm and friendly. When I say well, you can certainly come over as being warm, even if you don't feel particularly warm. I think you know how to express yourself, and you know how to put people at their ease, even if privately you're always thinking about your own agenda. Gemini. Right now, Gemini, you can be quite effective in your own way, provided you understand your limitations. I mean, right now, Gemini, there are things you don't necessarily want to do, and I don't think that you particularly want to get sort of tied up with other people and their needs and their problems. I mean, you can if you want, but I don't think you really want to. I think ideally you would just do things at your own pace. I mean, that the time for action is perhaps approaching. I mean, after all, the Moon is about to move into Gemini. In fact, if you're in the Americas, then this evening the Moon starts to move into Gemini. In fact, if you're in the UK, I think right at the end of the day you do get the sign change, and you do start to get the Gemini influence. But for most of us, for most of the time, probably all of the time, all of the time if you're not in the Americas, the moon is in Taurus, just getting ready to move into Gemini. So it's not quite there yet, and so because of that, you can be effective if you want to be, but I don't think you're necessarily going to really want to be at the centre of things. But you have a certain charm to you. I mean, it's not an obvious charm. It doesn't kind of jump out at you, or at least rather jump out as far as other people are concerned. But if you want to make an impression, if you want to have an influence, I certainly think you can. And it's kind of it's kind of quite subtle. Don't forget Mercury is very much retrograde right now, and so you don't necessarily want to be completely direct. And I mean, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You don't want to say things directly. You don't want to come straight to the point while Mercury is retrograde. But in your own subtle way, you can make your feelings clear. I mean, after all, the Moon is making a sextile to the Sun, and it's also making a sextile to Mercury. So if there's something you want, some impression you want to make, then really that shouldn't be a problem. And this may especially apply to money. So if you feel that there's something financial that you're not entirely happy about, that people need to hear about, you need to just express some of your concerns, then I think you should be, quite effective. As I said, you are effective today, but it's not necessarily obvious, and maybe you could sort of find yourself working behind the scenes. But is that always the right thing to do? One thing that we do have happening today, I mean, you could say it's the main event, is Venus making a conjunction to the South Node. So we've got the North Node in Pisces, and we've then got a Venus and the South Node in Virgo. And don't forget that the North Node is getting closer and closer to 0 degrees Pisces. It's just about to leave the sign, and the Venus conjunct the South Node may be about a pull. You are being kind of pulled away from things. Firstly, by yourself, I think. I think that, Gemini, you don't want to be involved. And also to an extent by certain other people. I mean, it might be members of your family, people you know well. They seem to be pulling you in a particular direction. They're pulling you away from things. And in fact, there's something that you need to be involved with, which is really quite central. It might be connected with your work, not just today, but while the North Node is moving through what is the last degree of Pisces. While the North Node is moving through that degree, you need to be really pulling out all the stops and doing whatever is necessary to make an impact. It does matter. Okay, it's not like you absolutely have to do anything today, but you need to be aware of everything that is stopping you from achieving what you could be achieving. And if you stay at home and you just ruminate, so that's not quite the right thing to be doing. But Gemini, I still think that there is a temptation to do that. There's a temptation coming both from yourself and from some of the people around you, and so do think about that North Node in Pisces. That is kind of what you should be doing. And if you look at your horoscope, you can see that the North Node in Pisces is right at the top of the chart, right up here. This is where you should be going, and maybe the North Node's power is becoming particularly strong just before it moves backwards into Aquarius. So think, Gemini, what is it that you need to do? It's probably something you just don't want to do, and you're perhaps coming up with excuses, and you might be afraid of social interaction. Maybe you're afraid of expressing your opinions. You're maybe even afraid of being ambitious in a public setting. And if you have a fear, then that is a sure sign that the nodal axis is at work, and it's a sure sign that you need to address these fears, because now might be the time. Cancer. Moon is moving through Taurus today, like it was yesterday. Okay, eventually the moon will move into Gemini, particularly if you're in the Americas, but at noon New York time, the moon is at 25 degrees, 54 degrees, 5 degrees, 25 degrees, 54 Taurus. So it's still got 4 degrees left before it leaves Gemini. So, I think that you can regard that moon in Taurus as being a major sort of feature of the day. And, with the moon in Taurus, the moon is is exalted in this sign. So, by and large, you're going to be feeling pretty good about yourself. And the moon in Taurus is making a sextile to the sun, and it's making a sextile to Mercury. And of course, Mercury is moving through your sign. And so, that does suggest that you can be open, you can be honest, you can tell people how you feel, and it's not a time to be, keeping things back. And I think that honesty, by and large, is going to be appreciated. And because the moon is making sextiles, that suggests a little bit of effort. You have to make sure that you come over in the right way. It's not like you can do the first thing that comes to mind. You have to put some effort into it, but not too much effort. And if you are socializing in any way, or if you have to deal with other people, I just think that you'll come across pretty well. Even though Mercury is retrograde, I mean, perhaps one exaggerates the importance of Mercury being Gemini, with Mercury being retrograde, and certainly the words will be available. So you'll certainly know what needs to be said, and by and large, I think that you'll get your timing right. Now, you might notice that the moon is conjunct Algol. So with the moon conjunct Algol, okay, there might be times in the day where you have your doubts. There might be something that you are slightly sort of worried about. You're wondering, where exactly, is it going? And if you were to pursue this matter and think too hard about it, then you might come up with concepts of injustice, or perhaps a feeling that maybe someone is jealous of you with moon conjunct Algol, and that might have an impact on the way you judge what other people say, how other people respond to you. But perhaps you shouldn't overthink it. I mean, the moon is in Algol. The moon makes this conjunction to Algol every month, and maybe it isn't such a big deal. And perhaps the key point to make about the moon being in Taurus is it is exalted. And so if the moon is exalted and the moon is your ruler, then that means that you're exalted as well. So that looks pretty good. And at the same time, we have got Venus moving into Virgo, and Venus is making a conjunction to the South Node. By and large, I think that Venus moving into Virgo is a good thing. We've had a situation recently where there haven't been any planets in Earth signs, except the moon. Okay, the moon every now and then goes into an Earth sign, like it is now, like it's in Taurus, and it moves out of an Earth sign, and there's nothing in Earth, and things might not feel particularly grounded. But now that Venus is in Virgo, I think you are feeling grounded. I mean, I think a lot of other people are feeling more grounded, and you're starting to notice things which you hadn't noticed before. And you might have noticed things relating to the material world, perhaps things which have a financial nature. I mean, it's certainly good to notice stuff, but you don't want to exaggerate, and you don't want to make anything too significant, especially when Venus is conjunct the South Node. So perhaps the problem with Venus conjunct the South Node is that you just might be inclined to look at things at quite a basic material level, and this might say something about what you say and what you want to talk about, what you want to point out. And so you might notice something on the surface, perhaps something about people's behavior, or what people are doing and what people are not doing. And you might want to point it out. Or even if you're not pointing out, it may say something about the way you're thinking. And so your first thought, your first impression may not actually be the right impression. I mean, it might be factually correct, but in terms of the broader picture, it may just be a simplification. And I think with the Venus conjunct the South Node, you just may be tempted to look at things in a way that is too material, is too simplistic, and instead you should be trying to look at things in a sort of a broader sense. And I know it's difficult to make that transition, particularly if a lot of other people seem to be on that same wavelength. Other peoples just seem to be focusing on trivialities and just the material details of things, when there's something further, something more is going on. So I think Cancer, it's important that you don't just follow what other people are thinking, and you don't just take an explanation at face value. So you might be told something, you might, for example, ask a question, you get a reply, and the reply might be very reasonable, but it's not necessarily really true. I mean, I'm sorry to use a sort of a bureaucratic analogy, but if you have a problem with an organization and you write a letter to them, I'm thinking particularly of local government, because I seem to be quite concerned with local government and thinking about local government and how it operates. When you ask a question, you'll get a reply, and the reply will be absolutely reasonable, and the reply will it might quote laws and codes and a chapter and verse and so on, and the reply in itself is absolutely correct, but it's missing the point. And I think that is the thing to realize. People can be absolutely right, but they can miss the point, and it may be a form of misdirection at worst. So when you listen to outside explanations, just consider the possibility that it is all a big misdirection, and that the truth of the matter requires something else. It requires you to sort of move beyond the immediate situation and to, in fact, use your feelings. After all, you're a Cancerian. That's something you are very good at doing. Leo. You maybe, Leo, feel that it's time to just be yourself and not necessarily be as connected with things as you used to be. And in fact, Leo, there is a feeling of farewell here. I mean, I don't know what you want to say goodbye to. I'm not saying there's anything you do have to say goodbye to, but it just might be that you're reaching the conclusion that something has run its course, and it's been good up to a point, but you need to start thinking about other things, new pastures. And so think about all the things going on in your life, and that might include some relationships. I'm not thinking about, I think, sort of major relationships, but some of the relationships, some of the perhaps incidental relationships in your life have perhaps just gone as far as they can, and now it might be time to say goodbye, or at least to separate yourself from them. I mean, you can say goodbye to something, without necessarily just sort of walking away and making a big scene about it, but just mentally, I think that there are certain things that you are wanting to distance yourself from, and it's maybe your response to the fact that Jupiter has moved into Leo. And so Jupiter, of course, moved into Leo just over a week ago, and that was a big change. And I am very, very optimistic about what it means for Jupiter to be in Leo for you. I mean, Jupiter is the greater benefic. It's a very fortunate planet, all things being equal. So when it's in your sign, there should be many opportunities. And what can stop those opportunities coming into being? Well, one thing that can stop it all happening is you being too tied to the past. If you just carry on as normal, if you don't make any changes to your life, if you are even surrounded by the same people, it could well be that you are preventing Jupiter in Leo from actually working. And so in an extreme situation, in just over a year's time, when Jupiter moves into Virgo, you might be thinking, well, what was that all about? That was all a great disappointment. Well, it needn't be a disappointment, but the earlier you make the changes, the better. And so there just could be certain things, people, situations which have passed their sell-by date, and now might be the time to make the change. And while you're at it, Taurus, thinking about things, sorry, not Taurus, I mean Leo. While you're at it, Leo, do think about what you are trying to achieve, because right now I think you can achieve quite a lot. The moon is, after all, making a sextile to the sun. The sun is your ruler. The moon is making a sextile to Mercury. So in your own way, you can, I think, today make solid progress. And while you're making solid progress, think about all the reasons why you might not be making solid progress. And I think that just might well be connected with ties from the past, things that are just are not any longer serving any useful purpose. And something else going on is Venus making a conjunction to the South Node. And Venus conjunct with South Node, it takes place in Virgo, and we might say that Venus conjunct with South Node is thinking about things maybe in the wrong way, because that's the nature of the South Node. The South Node is about the past, and with Venus conjunct with South Node, it's kind of hitting the finance axis of your chart, because Virgo is your second house. It represents your money. Pisces is the opposite sign, represents perhaps more complicated money. And with Venus conjunct with South Node, there's perhaps a danger, or some danger, that you just look at things in a way that is just too basic. And I'm thinking particularly of money here. It is just about money. And perhaps you shouldn't just look at things purely in terms of simple money, how much you are being paid, how much you have to pay. But there might be pressure in that direction, even in terms of your work. So if you're working, you can certainly see where the money is, and how money might be important, and perhaps people are trying to save money. And if you can save a few dollars or a few pounds here and there, or a few euros, that's great. But you need to go beyond that. And Venus conjunct the South Node might just be about people over concerned about money, authority figures over concerned about money, and maybe you as well. And somehow you've got to get beyond that and look at things in a more profound way, rather than Venus conjunct the South Node in Virgo. Think about the North Node in Pisces, and the North Node is getting ready to move into Aquarius. But while it's still in Pisces, do think about money, but the right attitude to money. And I think, Leo, the right attitude to money at the moment for you is to see and recognize that at some level it is quite complicated. Nothing is entirely straightforward. If you just see things in terms of cash amounts, then you might be missing the point. You have to look at the dynamics of it all, and so be aware that things are more complicated than expected. And if you find that certain people, particularly at work, it may be in other areas, are overly concerned about money, and perhaps talking about money more than they should be, then maybe that is a sign that something isn't entirely right. But it is a situation that you can certainly deal with. I mean, the moon is making a sextile to the sun, and that this moon sextile sun, as I like to say with this kind of aspect, is very harmonious, and you can create a harmonious environment with relative ease. So if things aren't entirely going your way at first, I think that you can make some changes, and you don't have to make a big fuss, but you just have to be constant, and just remind yourself of what you believe in, and I think that that you will be fine. But just going back to your career, I think if you have a career, it does depend, or it might be your overall direction in life. It just is possible that something is not entirely right, that at some level you might be going in the wrong direction, or perhaps you're being pulled in the wrong direction. And if that is the case, maybe it's just a question of saying something, doing something maybe slightly unexpected. After all, an aspect we do have today is Venus trine Chiron. And, Chiron is right at the top of your chart. Venus Chiron is part of your chart connected with work and how you come over in a social setting. And so with Venus trine Chiron, it might be relatively easy for you to change the emphasis. Perhaps you can be gently disruptive, or maybe it all starts as you being stubborn. You just decide that, hold on, this is not right. And so if you're being pulled in one way, perhaps by other people, you can resist this and say, no, this is not the right approach. It might be rather courageous having to stand up and say that this is wrong, this doesn't seem to be the right way of doing things. But I think that if you do stand up for what you believe in, if you stand up for what you know is true, I think that very quickly everyone will come round to your way of thinking. Virgo. Venus is, of course, in Virgo, and I talked about that yesterday, and I think that by and large, Venus moving into Virgo is certainly a good thing. I mean, Venus is a fortunate planet, and so when it's in Virgo, you feel good about yourself, and at the same time, you have the ability to be relatively warm and friendly, and I think that by and large people are going to like you without you having to make a great deal of effort. And as I think I said yesterday, I think with Venus in Virgo, you're probably going to be most effective during the hours of daylight. After sunset, Venus does lose some of its power, its power to work for you, and it might become sort of more of a problem. And because the thing about Venus is that it rules the earth signs by day, but it is also fallen in Virgo, and so perhaps activities taking place by night may not always work. And so ideally get the important stuff out of the way before the sun sets. Maybe that's just a rather exaggerated and flowery way of looking at things. But there is certainly symbolic and astrological reason for what I'm saying. Now, the key thing about Venus in Virgo right now is the fact that it's conjunct the South Node. and the South Node is in Virgo. So this Venus conjunct the South Node, there are two ways of looking at it. And if one looks at the nodes in terms of the past and the future, saying, well, where should you be going to? What should you be moving from? And so with Venus conjunct the South Node, the past is present. I mean, the past is very much with you. And I think that there is, a strong pull here for you to be doing things which maybe you should have grown out of. You kind of realized recently, or not even recently, but at some stage in the past, that a particular set of activities weren't really doing you any good, they weren't constructive. But now you just might be tempted to go back and revisit old habits. Now, I'm not saying that any great damage is going to be caused, and in fact, it might be absolutely fine because you're just doing something that just is you're completely familiar with. You're too familiar with. It's so easy that in a way it's a waste of time. You could be thinking about things in a different way. You could be pushing yourself. You could be challenging yourself. But that Venus conjunct the South Node is just encouraging you to do the opposite. You do what is easy, and maybe you're encouraged to do what is easy by other people. You spend time with the same people, people from the past, people who are just easy to deal with, and it's great, and it's kind of self-reinforcing. Everyone is telling you what you want to hear, you're telling them what they want to hear, and that's great, but there is no progress. Things aren't moving on, and it might well be the case that as far as is possible, you should be looking for challenges. You be looking for social challenges. The North Node is in Pisces, the North Node is in your opposite sign, and so think about what people have to offer, and at the same time avoid the temptation to be selfish. That might be a possibility, to just put things completely putting things completely in terms of your own world, and just not considering outside views, and short term a bit of selfishness can get you a long way. You're very pleased with yourself today if you just did things your way. You only looked after your own interests. But longer term, I don't think it is the right thing to do. So be careful about what you are doing. And when you've got a choice, don't always take the easy choice. Take the choice that is more challenging. Okay, that I don't mean challenging as in dangerous. I mean challenging as in perhaps which is sort of socially challenging, and which relates to the future rather than the past. And with Venus conjunct the South Node, it just might be that the past is so much easier than the future that well, better just stay in the past because it's more straightforward. But Venus conjunct the South Node, that is not the only way of looking at it. The nodal axis can just be connected with people in general, making contacts, making the right contacts even. And so with Venus conjunct the South Node, I think that certainly helps you socially, because it's not just Venus conjunct the South Node, it's Venus conjunct the nodal axis. And we should perhaps collapse the nodal axis in on itself. So perhaps we should stop thinking about the North and the South Node. Just see it as the node. And with Venus conjunct this axis, I think that your ability to get on with people is actually pretty good.
and you can deal with a wide range of different people, and you can enjoy their company. And I think a lot of your effort is sort of going sort of outwards, thinking about thinking about society out there. And especially as the moon is getting ready to move into Gemini, that's kind of interesting, because we're about to get a sort of moon Uranus Mars conjunction tomorrow, and that's something for me to talk about. When I say tomorrow, I mean Saturday, over the weekend. And so that's going to be perhaps dramatic, maybe a little bit challenging. So from a social perspective, I think that things do look quite good, and you can be actually very convincing if you want to be, Virgo. So if you want to be persuasive, if you want to get people to believe something, or if you want people to get closer to you for whatever reason, I think you'll know what to do, and I think you can actually be quite powerful today. It's not immediately obvious, but you decide what you want. You decide what you want people to do, and in many cases it can actually happen your way. And then you just have to think, is it right? And you have to think about the moral dimension. But morality aside, you can be influential, and you can even be rather manipulative. Libra. A lot of emphasis on Venus. There has been a lot of emphasis on Venus recently, and that matters for you, because Venus is your ruler, and you've just experienced Venus moving into Virgo, and Venus moving into Virgo. All things being equal, it's probably not the best sign for Venus to be in. While Venus is moving through Virgo, I think, Libra, there are going to be times when you don't necessarily want to be involved. You'd kind of like to be able to do things in a way that is very particular to you, and I think that you're going to be sort of appreciating your privacy, over the next few weeks. I mean, Venus doesn't stay in Virgo forever. In the first week of August, Venus moves into Libra. Now, that is a big deal. As I said yesterday, I think it's a major event. I think it just makes things just so much easier for you when Venus moves into Libra. But for the moment, you kind of you kind of value your own space, and you would perhaps like to drift. In an ideal world, just drift around in your own private world without having to commit to anything, without having to really, address the real world. But Venus is conjuncting the South Node. So when you've got Venus conjunct the South Node, there is a bit of a warning here. So when you think about the South Node, well, there is a view that the South Node is sort of an equivalent of Saturn. So the North Node would be the equivalent of Jupiter. And so Venus conjunct the South Node might be a Saturnine experience, just feeling that you're not doing things right, that there is a better way of operating. And I think that in your attempts to do the right thing, you might take the view that it's best to look at the past. So you go back to the past, you think about what you were doing in the past, and the past might just seem just a lot easier from the present and the future. And so there is a possibility, Libra, that you just go back to old habits. And it's almost quite sort of unconscious. And what am I talking about in old habits? Okay, it could be old ways of thinking. It could be people from the past. It could be unhealthy habits, whatever they might be. I don't want to give those unhealthy habits power by giving examples. And so do think about how you are responding. And it just could be that some of your responses are not particularly healthy. And, instead you need to be sort of more disciplined. And I think discipline actually is very important today. And you need to have awareness. You have to have an awareness of your own unconscious processes, because your unconscious processes just could be taking you in an undesirable direction. And yeah, it is a direction that is related to the past. And so having discipline and just watching every passing minute, if at all possible, having that kind of awareness of time as it passes, and looking at those sort of unconscious impulses might just absolutely be the right thing to do. So yeah, there is certainly a negative side to Venus conjunct the South Node, but I also think that as far as your ability to get on with people, I think you can do very well. I think that from a social viewpoint, you may not feel like getting on with people, but if you make the effort, then I think that you can be quite powerful, and I think that people are going to like you. But the question is, will you make the effort? Because I think that part of you, Libra, kind of wants to be alone. You want to just be able to do things in your own way, and if you can do that, you'll be fine, or at least you might feel that you're going to be fine. So don't completely shut out other people, even if that seems to be your inclination. Now, I did say that there was a lot of stuff going on with Venus, and there's one other thing going on with Venus, and Venus is making a trine to Chiron. So, Venus trine Chiron presents something rather new, and I think that Venus trine Chiron perhaps is suggestive of how you are different. Chiron is a very sort of unique energy. It is potentially a bit of a troublemaker. Chiron can be a troublemaker. It sort of upsets the equilibrium. And as a Libran, you're very familiar with equilibrium. After all, the balance, the scales is a symbol, is your symbol, and you know what it takes to create upset. And in your own quiet way, if you tune into that Venus trine Chiron, you may realize that things aren't going particularly well, that people are complacent, that people are just making assumptions, and deep down that it's all wrong. If you're completely honest with yourself. And once you realize that things are wrong, that things are going in the wrong direction, and I'm not just talking about you, I'm just talking about everything, everyone around you, what people are doing, what people are thinking. Once you have that realization, you start to appreciate what you can do to be a disruptor. And in fact, Libra, although part of you wants to just disappear and not be part of things, the reality is that with Venus trine Chiron, you have the capacity to cause a huge amount of disruption if you want to. And I think you know exactly what needs to be done. Although, with Venus trine Chiron, one can look at it in a more sort of traditional way and say, well, Chiron is the healer. Venus trine Chiron does give you a natural ability to heal. So it's possible in a sort of
I won't say in a therapeutic way. Well, if you happen to be a psychotherapist, then having Venus trine Chiron
would suggest that your healing powers should be particularly powerful at the moment. But, also in your daily interactions, you just have a good understanding of what other people are going through. And it won't take much to be able to heal. And when I say heal, I'm saying that I must emphasize, I'm not talking about this in a sort of a medical sense, well, unless you happen to be a medical professional, but I'm talking about things in a more sort of general sense, saying the right thing to make people feel good about themselves. And you have an awareness of other people's wounds, how other people might be hurting. And and it's not just because Venus is trine Chiron, it's also the fact that the North Node is in Pisces. That does give you a sensitivity if you want to look for it. And so I think, Libra, you can actually be a force for good today if you can be bothered. Scorpio, you can certainly have an impact. You've been able to have an impact for some time, and this ability to get people to sit up and listen right now, Scorpio, is, I think, pretty strong. And your interventions can maybe come from nowhere. You just say something. You wait, you observe. And when the time is right, Scorpio, you say what's on your mind, and you make your observation, and it can sting. And so the sting side of Scorpio is actually quite strong right now. That's sometimes forgotten about, isn't it? I mean, when one can see Scorpio as being sort of vulnerable and sort of hiding, but all the while you can really get people to sit up and listen. People sit up and listen when they have been stung, and you can sting in particular, Scorpio, through your words. The things you say can be powerful, but just because you can sting doesn't mean, of course, that you should sting. But if you feel that people are being complacent, that things aren't going necessarily your way, and other people aren't being helpful, you can certainly create change, create powerful change. And so if you see an opportunity to make a dramatic intervention, then maybe you should just go for it. But if you are making some kind of intervention, I think it happens with a degree of awareness. I think right now, with the moon moving through Taurus, your opposite sign, I think that you have a good awareness of other people, and what's important to them. And so I think, so by and large, you're quite a good judge of character right now. And the moon is also making a sextile to Mercury. So with that moon sextile Mercury, you're able to talk about what you see and feel. And yes, if you want to be dramatic in terms of what you say, you certainly can be. But you have a choice. You can actually, with the moon sextile with Sun, you can be reassuring. You can make everyone feel comfortable and happy and feeling that everything is right. And that kind of gives you a certain amount of power. So if you want everyone to have a good time and to feel comfortable, you can. If you want people to be agitated and disturbed, you can also make that happen. So that does give you a certain responsibility, doesn't it? You can change the mood very, very quickly, and perhaps in a way that is quite subtle as well. You may be able to change the mood in ways that are indirect. You can see causality. You can see how one thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing. And so you can just sort of start the ball rolling and then just stand back and watch what you have created. So that does mean, Scorpio, that you should not underestimate your power, but at the same time you have to ask yourself, how important are other people really? How important is society? Should you be worrying too much about what other people are doing? Is it of any great consequence? And Venus is making a conjunction to the South Node today, and Venus is of course ruler of Taurus, your opposite sign, and the South Node can represent the past. So there might be a certain temptation to dwell in the past, to worry about people from the past, and to just get involved in certain social situations which aren't particularly helpful. And at the same time, there may be individuals in your life who represent the past, and if someone is representative of the past, then they are holding you back. You do need to think about the future. Being a Scorpio, the way you move forward, is at least symbolically through a series of transformations. I mean, one thinks of the snake as being one aspect of Scorpio. You've got there's the three animals that one can connect with Scorpio. The snake, the scorpion, and the eagle. At least according to Aleister Crowley in his book of Thoth, and how he describes the Death card, which of course the Death card is often associated tends to be associated with Scorpio, but the snake element of it is about series of transformation. So every now and then you feel that it is time to shed your skin, and maybe it's this kind of time that you should be thinking about shedding your skin. And of course, when I don't know about anything about snakes, but presumably when snakes shed their skin, they have to hide and make sure they're in a protected environment. And so when it is time to shed your skin, that means shedding perhaps people from the past, situations from the past, or things that are just not working anymore. And Venus conjunct the South Node could be about delaying the shedding of your skin because of a feeling of social obligation. So you might be hanging around in a particular state, an old state, for longer than you should. And with Venus conjunct the South Node, the pressure might be quite strong, and instead you need to sort of accept that certain things, maybe even certain people from the past, have, at least for the moment, had their day, and you need to be thinking about what is important to you, and you need to sort of be tuning into the creative side of yourself, and not allowing other people to dictate the agenda. Perhaps they've come up with good reasons for you to stay where you are, maybe clever arguments. They're pointing out the facts to you, material details. It all seems very convincing. But the reality is, Scorpio, that you should be thinking for yourself. You understand other people, for sure. You understand their motivations. And so if you understand people, you should be aware of what they're trying to do. And the fact that some people don't want change, they don't want you to change, but really, Scorpio, it might be just a time when you do need to move on, and you have the equipment and need tools to move on. And as I said at the beginning of this piece, you have the ability to really change things through the things you say. You can say things which change everything, and you have a pivotal role. If you recognize that pivotal role, you can change the mood, you can change the environment. So actually, Scorpio, today you are very powerful, but I just think there's a possibility you don't recognize this power.
Sagittarius.
Today, Venus makes a conjunction to the South Node in Virgo. And I think this conjunction between Venus and the South Node is potentially quite important. Now, if you have been listening to my some of my readings for the other signs, you might have noticed that I have been sort of quite negative about the South Node. I've said that the South Node perhaps represents things from the past that maybe you should perhaps be moving away from. And so with Venus conjunct the South Node, this might be something to perhaps be avoided. But, I'm not convinced that for you, Sagittarius, this is the right interpretation. I think that there is a positive side to the South Node. The South Node represents, things that you do well, things that you're very familiar with. And if something has worked in the past, then there is a very good chance it will work in the future as well. And so with Venus conjunct the South Node, this matters. Venus and the South Node are in a really important sign in your chart, in a very sort of high-profile sign, Virgo, often connected, with work, career, ambition, and with Venus conjunct the South Node, it might well be the right thing to do to emphasize what you have done in the past. And if something has worked well in the past, why stop? I mean, after all, we're living in difficult times, and we have to make the most of what we've got. And so perhaps you just use old talents, and you're not ashamed to revisit them, and that might really help you in terms of making real progress, and in terms of perhaps finding new work if you're looking for a new job. Maybe in terms of looking for a new job, you perhaps need to look at the past. Maybe you've got a connection from the past, a job you used to do, and you might think that it's all forgotten, but maybe it's not. And so the past is there to help you. It's your friend. And this also says something about the way you present yourself. It's very easy, I think, Sagittarius, to present yourself as someone who is charismatic and charming, and you definitely give the impression that you've got something to offer. Now, all the while you are thinking about your own interests. Nothing wrong with thinking about your own interests. Okay, not every Sagittarian is going to be thinking about their own interests, but I think that there is a possibility. And maybe that's where the negativity of the South Node might come in, if you're not careful. You can't just think about things in terms of yourself. You can't just think about things in terms of the material side of things. So, for example, from a career perspective, sure, you can, I think, be successful by revisiting the past, by revisiting abilities that you had in the past that can be used in the present and the future. But you don't want to be totally hung up on the material details. It's not just about money. It's not just about appearances. And I think that a bit of subtlety might be required, and you have to be especially careful if something is too easy. If you find something is really easy, it's going, it's really moving fast. It's just, you hardly have to think about it. If you're in that situation, that might be a warning. And what you do if something is too easy, you kind of almost have to make it more difficult. So it could be that you're going through something very quickly. It might be a checking process,
or you're just doing something you've done a million times before, and it's just so easy. But what you should do is slow things down. You should introduce, a bit of analysis here. Ask yourself, do you really know what you're doing? You do know what you're doing, but perhaps the situation has ever so slightly changed, and you need to be aware of that change. And by and large, Sagittarius, I think that right now, it is important to have a good sense of detail, and don't forget those details. It's easy to forget those details if you're doing something that you know really, really, really well. And I think it's like it's like there are two ways of operating on there. there's it's a long time since I've studied cognitive psychology, but there's procedural and there's declarative memory, and if I've got it right. So procedural memory is when memory is in terms of procedures. It's just learnt activities. You don't have to think about it. It's I don't know, it's like driving a car and changing gear. You don't really have to think about it. Yet when you first learn how to drive, you have to analyze everything. You have to put your foot on the clutch, and you have to do this and that and whatever. And the other type of memory is declarative memory, which I think is to do with sort of facts and having to go through the process. And what I'm saying is, try to be a little less procedural and a bit more declarative, because the advantage of declarative memory, while declarative memory is much slower because you have to go through all the facts, perhaps you're less likely to make a catastrophic mistake because you might be so used to something that you don't think about it, and you really sort of get yourself into trouble. But if you can analyze more, I think, Sagittarius, that would be useful. Not just useful, I think perhaps important. And at the same time as all of this, I think that you are looking for a change. Jupiter, of course, has now gone into Leo, and you're really feeling that. You're feeling the possibilities of Jupiter moving into Leo, and you don't want things to be the same, and you are aware of tectonic changes going on around you, Sagittarius, and perhaps you want these tectonic changes to be part of you, part of who you are, and it will happen. There's no need to be in too much of a hurry. And as far as other people in general are concerned, I think that right now, Sagittarius, your social abilities are, pretty good. After all, Venus is on the nodal axis. Let's not worry about Venus on the south node or Venus on the north node. The point is that Venus is hitting the nodal axis, and so you know how to relate, and you know how to win people's confidence, and so that all looks good. And there's just a slight moral issue there, because there's just some danger that you put your own interests first. Okay, there's nothing wrong with putting your own interests first, but you might neglect other people's needs, and try to understand what's going on, not just at a material level, but do make an effort to listen to your feelings. You're quite capable of listening to your feelings, but it just might require a little bit of effort. Capricorn. Venus is very much in Virgo now, and as I was saying yesterday, I think it's great that Venus is in Virgo for you. Venus is in an earth sign, and it just means you feel more at home, and you don't feel so worried, because things are kind of more sort of ordered. They're in the right place, and you can kind of feel some ground under your feet. But Venus is making a conjunction to the south node, and this Venus conjunct the south node does
mean that there is a sort of a link here with something beyond you. Venus conjunct the South Node. You'd like to go beyond. You'd like to try something new, but you're not quite sure why. And if you're not quite sure why, then possibly you should stick to what you have. And it might be, for example, Venus conjunct the South Node, that you're encouraged to experiment. Maybe you don't want to experiment, but you're being told to experiment. Maybe there's pressure to use some new technology. It seems quicker. It seems the right thing to do, but it might not be the right thing to do at all. And instead, Capricorn, maybe you should just stick with what you know, what you trust, what feels right. And I think that is the important point. If it feels right, then go with it. And so if you've got a conflict between the way you feel and what you're supposed to do, what you're being told to do, then trust your feelings every time, because you know what works. And so just being experimental for the sake of it, I don't think is going to be I don't think that's going to be the right approach. And at the same time, we do have Venus making a trine to Chiron. And in fact, you might say that Venus trine Chiron, is the big aspect of the day, especially from a Capricorn perspective, because it does mean that, Capricorn is the third Earth sign in this trine, or in this grand trine. You've got Moon and Venus in Virgo, Chiron in Taurus, and then you've got Capricorn. And so you really pick up on this on this Venus trine Chiron, and I think that it is about you holding firm. It's not a time to be doing what you're told. I've already said that. You don't just accept new technology, new ways of doing things just for the sake of it. You have your own approach, you have your own view, and I think that Venus trine Chiron is really encouraging you to be different, in your own way. And I think that if you're working, your approach is quite unique, and it's possible that you do something, or you feel you have to do something that might not make you popular. I mean, that is the nature of Chiron. Chiron is not about being popular. Sometimes Chiron has to do things which, in the short term, lead to sort of rejection and suspicion. But if something is wrong, or you feel it's wrong, then you've got to be open and honest about it. And so Capricorn, I think it's a day when you really need to just be yourself. It's certainly not a day for fitting in or for following trends. I mean, a lot of people are following trends. They think that certain behaviors are acceptable. They think, ways of thinking, ways of acting, but you have your own view, and in some respects your own view is quite traditional. I mean, Capricorn is a sign that understands the value of the past, but at the same time you know that change is necessary every now and then. And so Capricorn, it's a day that, it's a bit difficult to pin down. I'm not saying it's going to be an 100% easy day, but I think that it's a day when you need to focus on your individuality and what is important to you, and you mustn't be sort of browbeaten by other people. And if you want to follow a particular path, you go follow it, and
if something is trendy and popular, then perhaps it should be avoided. Aquarius. The moon still in Taurus, seems to have been in Taurus for ages, and the moon in Taurus does remind you, Aquarius, of what is important, and you don't want to do anything too dramatic while the moon is in Aquarius. I mean, why should you? I mean, it's not really, in fact, a particularly dramatic day. You just want to be able to do things according to your own rules, according to your own plan, and the less bother there is, the better. And also, if as far as is possible, you want to keep things simple. But you may, for one reason or another, not keep things simple. You might decide that something is really complicated, and you want to look at the most complicated way of viewing something as is possible. So, I don't know, are you attracted to complication? I mean, the advantage of complication, I mean, if it's complicated, then perhaps it feels more important. It feels more valid. And yeah, there is that temptation, and this could apply to money, for example. So when you look at a financial situation, you just might have all sorts of ideas about who is involved and what are the legal issues, and it just might seem completely insoluble, and you always want it to be insoluble. So if you've got that kind of situation, maybe you should just simplify it and resist any pressure to make it complicated. And it's not just you making things complicated. I think other people might be making things complicated. So you look for an explanation, and the explanation just makes it worse. And you might feel stuck, but deep down, you know it's simple. And so, as far as is possible, Aquarius, you should be focusing on making things straightforward. And your first impression, that first easy impression, that first feeling is probably right. And if you follow that first feeling, especially when it comes to money, I think that that is probably the right thing to do. And you might then realize that there was no point in asking complicated questions, getting outside opinions and so forth, because you always knew the answer. And so that might be a way in which you handle money and things that are of a complicated nature. And it just might be that other people's input is less than helpful, and you just need to keep things as straightforward as possible. Now, one aspect we do have today is Venus making a trine to Chiron. So, Venus trine Chiron is an aspect which is it's quite deep. It's quite an emotional aspect, especially in an Aquarian chart. And this Venus trine Chiron may be allowing you to tune into something very powerful that you have. It may be a gift, actually. Not a talent, something you've learned, but just a gift, something that you have always had, and you haven't necessarily talked about it. You've kept it to yourself, but you've always known about this gift, but you perhaps haven't had an opportunity to use it. And with Venus making this exact trine to Chiron, I think that this gift may be quite obvious to you at quite a deep level. And it's also connected with the South Node, because the Venus is conjunct the South Node. Chiron is trine Venus. Chiron is pretty much trine the South Node as well. And so the South Node, we can be negative about the South Node. We can say that, the South Node is about, things from the past, things you should be giving up, and North Node is the future and all that kind of stuff. But the South Node can be about, what has, developed in the past. And if we're thinking about a gift, what feels like a gift, and people talk about it as a gift, the psychic gift or spiritual gifts and whatever, these things are not learned. And maybe if you want to get really complicated about it, we're not really supposed to get complicated. I'm advocating really simplicity today, so I don't want to overcomplicate, but maybe I'm just contradicting myself here. But if you're talking about a gift, it may be something that has been developed in a previous incarnation. If you believe in incarnation, it's just something you have in this incarnation that perhaps had to be developed in a previous incarnation, and it's kind of available to you now with this trine involving Chiron and the Venus South Node conjunction. So something from the past is now starting to manifest. It's still very subtle. It's still taking place at a level that you don't really want to talk about it, but you just feel that you have something, and that perhaps you can offer it to humanity. I mean, it's there, and I'm just trying to interpret the astrological symbolism here in the most positive way. So, Aquarius, do consider that. I'm not just making it up. I think I can see the symbolism in the chart here. Pisces. Venus is conjunct the South Node in Virgo. So that's taking place in your opposite sign. And this might well say something about relationships. It means that you have to be somewhat careful. There is pressure here to conform. There's pressure to maybe do what someone else says. So, if someone wants you to do something, I think your first inclination will be to say, okay, you don't really want to refuse, you don't really want to upset people, and that might feel the right approach, because when you're dealing with the South Node, it's what is easiest, and it's just easiest to be accommodating. But I don't think it's necessarily the right thing to do. The North Node is still in Pisces, and the North Node in Pisces represents you. It represents your rights. It's about you standing up for yourself. And there's all sorts of pressure to give in. But I think if something is important to you, then I think that you need to hold firm, and it's not your job to make other people feel happy. It's not your job at all. I mean, sure, if people are happy, that's great, but it's not your personal responsibility, and it may be that you have to be quite defiant if you're being pressurized, and certainly. That's one way of looking at Venus conjunct the South Node. Maybe you've been accommodating in the past. Maybe there are loyalties from the past which you feel that you have to give into. But I just don't think that is the right thing to do. And we could see Venus in Virgo as being one particular person who is unhelpful, who may not necessarily have your best interests at heart. So be careful of other people, particularly with Venus conjunct the South Node. And that is certainly a negative way of looking at things. Now, Venus is aspecting the nodal axis. It's not just the North Node, South Node. And, Venus is the planet of relationships. And maybe for a moment, let's just forget
the fact that it's in Virgo. Let's just see it as Venus. Venus, the planet of love, the planet of relationships. And so with Venus on the nodal axis, you might say then that your ability to get on with people, to be warm, to be friendly is extremely good. And therefore you have actually the ability to be persuasive. It doesn't have to be you being the one being persuaded. If there's something you want, you're actually able to create a situation where you can actually get it. So in fact, you could be able to turn the tables. And I think that you're going to be helped by the fact that you just have a good understanding of human nature. I mean, you're a Pisces after all, and you understand what's happening at an emotional level. You understand other people's feelings, and because of all of this, you can put yourself into a situation where you do get your way, and it should actually be pretty straightforward. So it can be a day where you are very powerful. It can also be a day where you just give away your power, where you have zero power whatsoever. So in that sense, Pisces, you do have a certain choice. Now, Venus is not just conjunct the South Node, it is also making a trine to Chiron. And, Venus trine Chiron is quite a social aspect. It does say something about how you are communicating, and I think it can be helpful. I think you can communicate on many different levels, and I think that with Venus trine Chiron, you have a good awareness of where people are hurting. I mean, Chiron is, of course, the wounded healer. Venus in Virgo, you could say, represents you and your understanding of other people. So, yeah, if you understand people's wounds, and because you understand people's wounds, you understand people's behavior and their motivations, because it is the wound that leads to particular behavior patterns. And so, if someone is being unreasonable or is behaving badly, then you can perceive the inner wound. You can start to get an idea about why they are behaving in the way they're behaving, and that can give you an additional advantage. It also gives you the possibility of making things better. Perhaps you can address people's wounds and try to, in some way, do some healing. And when I say healing, I don't mean healing in a medical sense. It's just perhaps saying the right things, saying some kind words. If you can do that, then you can make people. You can indeed make people feel better about themselves. But it is important also, Pisces, that you look after your own interests. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was standstill, hexagram number 12. So this hexagram doesn't seem great. I mean, standstill means literally that things are not moving. I mean, we'd like them to move, but they're not. And additionally, there is a possibility that the wrong people are in power. The sort of the inferior elements are taking advantage of the situation. And so, that just makes matters worse. And our first impression when we deal with this hexagram, or at least when we experience a day that is characterized by standstill, is just to say, well, there's nothing we can do. Everything is stuck. Now, this hexagram standstill does have 3 moving lines. So there is definitely action. So it's not really standstill, because things are moving, and by and large, I think that we know how to behave. The first line moves, and so with the first line moving, that's saying something about our attitude, and it is about keeping a low profile. We know that it is a difficult situation. I mean, if we don't know that it's a difficult situation, we soon will. So at the beginning of the day, take it slowly. Realize that the situation is difficult, and it just may be about sort of staying out of trouble. So if we want to stay out of trouble, if we want to stay away from the inferior elements, we certainly can. And then the second line moves. And by the stage of the second line, we're starting to be aware of what is going on. And it does seem that the inferior elements seem to have the upper hand. Who has the influence? Who's calling the shots? And the people with the power seem to be the people who don't deserve to have the power. And that is annoying, and we just feel that we should be doing something about it. But short term, there's really nothing that can be done. And then the fourth line moves. So when you got the fourth line, you've crossed. When I say crossed, okay, I don't want to be too dramatic about it. You could say that with this hexagram there is an abyss. Of course, crossing the abyss is this sort of occult phrase which is extremely dramatic. Crossing the abyss is this, I don't know, it's like the dark night of the soul times 1,000. Crossing the abyss, when one was in sort of incredible danger on one's spiritual development, when one could easily just fall into the abyss. But the abyss is, you could say, is between earth and heaven. The bottom hexagram, the bottom trigram is it's all broken lines. It's material. It's the earth. It's the inferior people. It's everything wrong with the earth. And then the top three lines, the unbroken lines, represents heaven. But heaven and earth are separated by the abyss, and you can certainly see this in this hexagram. But again, I don't want to sort of over dramatize, and perhaps I'm using sort of occult terms in the wrong context here. But the fourth line means one has made some progress. We've made some progress to the top half of the hexagram, to the top trigram, and it's at this stage where we can start to take control. The inferior elements have gone as far as they can, or they're now vulnerable, and so we have a chance here to create movement and to bring things back under control, and perhaps to create order out of chaos. And with all these moving lines, that means that we have a transition. We move to a second hexagram. The dog's been quite quiet recently, hasn't she? But now she's got her voice back, and there's definitely something that she's shouting at. And so when we make this transition, don't forget there were three moving lines. It means we do move to hexagram number 61, which is inner truth. It's a very different hexagram. In the previous hexagram number 12, no one was believing us. There was nothing we could say, nothing we could do until right at the last moment we had a chance to bring things back under control. But here, inner truth, things have found their balance again. I mean, you look at the previous hexagram, standstill. It's a completely unbalanced hexagram. it's sort of top heavy. It doesn't look good. Whereas hexagram 61, inner truth, is completely balanced, and it's got that space, that vacuum in the middle of it, that space for the truth. It's not arrogant. It's prepared to listen, and maybe people are prepared to listen to us. Perhaps they weren't listening to us for much of the day. We could say what we like, but we were being ignored. But finally, we are making an impression. And it's not just about us trying to persuade other people of the truth. It's about our truth as well. And I think that, by the end of the day, we understand what is important. And, because we have that space for the truth. And we kind of are able to align ourselves with this truth, and that means that we do feel a certain sense of harmony, because people understand us, we understand them, and everything is back under control. And that's it. That's all I've got to say for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.